So in this section, we will be discussing about the Splunk HTTP Event Collector. So the Splunk HTTP Event Collector has gained a lot of popularity in a world that has been shifting more into the serverless and the cloud native side. Of course, there is no need for a package installation on the client side, which means you don't need an actual universal forwarder to forward these HTTP event data to the HTTP event collector, because it's using pretty much a well-recognized protocol, which is the HTTP, and it's known for being scalable, secure, and above all, it's token-based for convenience and easy to maintain. Now, let's discuss more about the HTTP event collector in here. So the HTTP event collector, think of it like API, which is exposed on the Splunk side. Now, HTTP event collector normally would accept either JSON format logs or raw data. So we have two endpoints in here, which is the services collector event for JSON format, events, and the services collector raw endpoint for raw data. So the HTTP event collector is an endpoint that lets developers, send application events directly to Splunk via HTTP or HTTPS. So that means you don't need a universal forwarder because it's agentless. So a developer can use, for instance, a C URL, or curl, basically, to actually send those HTTP events, to the HTTP event collector. Now let's walk you through that. Now it's a token-based, either HTTP or HTTPS for authentication. It sends the HTTP events directly without the need for an agent. Now pay special attention in here. HTTP event collector cannot accept your data unless the HTTP data is authenticated. This is done by having the token in the authorization header of each HTTP request. So as you're sending those HTTP event data, you need to provide a token which matches the same token which has been configured in here. Otherwise, the HTTP event collector will drop those events. And we can see that momentarily, in our simulation here. So this is what we're going to be using. This is the curl command that we will be using. And I will break it down for you so we will understand more on how we can basically use the curl command to forward those events to the HTTP event collector. So let's actually jump ahead and configure basically the HTTP event collector on Splunk. So let's switch to my admin course. It's just an app context that I've created. So let's go to settings, data inputs. We scroll down, this one. Now, here says all the tokens are currently disabled. They can be enabled in the global settings. So first, what we need to do is to enable the global settings for HTTP event collector. So let's click on that. Let's make sure that it's enabled. We're going to go and accept JSON format. Now the default index, I would go for main. Now for the default output group, so think of this. Okay, let me just show you into our diagram. So this comes into play when you sending those HTTP event data to your HTTP event collector. Now, typically in a distributed environment, maybe you want to collect those logs in here on a Splunk endpoint like a heavy forwarder, but also whatever you're going to be collecting from here, sending it to an indexing tier. And this is exactly what it means by output group. In my case, I'm using a local machine, so I'm not going to enable the SSL, so I'm going to keep it as it is. I'm going to use the HTTP port 8088, and I'm just going to save it. So now the global settings has been done. I'm going to go ahead and create a new token. So I'm going to call it admin course. This is completely optional. So source name overwrite, I can do that as well. So I'm going to call it HEC admin course. So I'm assigning this to the source. Description, I'm going to leave it optional. This is again the same output groups. So I'm going to leave it to none. So let's go ahead and hit next. I'm going to leave that to automatic, and I'm going to use the main index as the allowed index. This is the default as a last resort. Let's review that. So this is the input type, the HTTP input type, and this is the name that we have assigned. This is the source override. Of course, the allowed indexes is main, and this is the default last resort. So, and this is under the app context, admin course, which is this one. So let's submit that. And this is actually the token that I have generated by enabling this HEC endpoint. Now, this is in the GUI. Let's show you guys how that would look like under the configuration. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use actually btool to show you how could btool help us, to determine where we have configured those. So let's do bin Splunk, and then btool help. So I could use this, to help me configure, to write the right command. So btool inputs, because I'm going to be looking at the inputs.conf file for all the configurations within the HTTP event collector. Of course, I don't need to provide the .conf extension. I'm going to go for list here. The stanza is HTTP, and then I'm going to do minus debug, hit enter. And as I can see, the configurations for the HTTP stanza that we've done for the global settings. So let me show you. Let's go to data inputs, HTTP event collector, global settings, and I mean those would be located under here. So nano. And this is exactly what we've configured. So HTTP, so it's enabled now in here. As you can see, it's enabled. I'm using the index main, source type is JSON, and enable SSL is set to 0 because it's disabled in here. So let's exit. And let's actually check also the settings, that we've done here under the GUI, and see it under the conf file. So as we see, it's here. So let's just copy that. Nano, hit enter. So as you see, it's enabled. It's index main. Allowed indexes is also main, and this is the source override that we've done, which is here. And this is the token that I'll be using basically in here in my my curl command, so I can forward the HTTP event data to the HTTP event collector. So I'm gonna change this one. So let me just remove this part and then copy this whole curl command and then run it. So if you see, this is 394, this is 394. So I'm using this token because on both ends needs to match. So let's go to here and let's run that curl command. Copy, paste. Of course, let's break it down. So curl -k, that's the curl command. In case you don't have the curl command, you can do is sudo apt install curl. So that's the curl command. -k to skip certificate check. And then this is the actual host and the default port. And if you see here, this is the endpoint, services/collector/event. This is the endpoint, services collector event, which I'm going to be calling for. And then into the header, I'm going to provide the authorization. Always provide Splunk as identifier prior to the token. Now this is the token that I'm going to be providing, which matches this one. And then -d for the data payload. And this is a source type of -JSON, and the events, I'm going to be creating a field value pair. So this is kind of like a JSON format. So let's hit enter. And as you can see, it's a success. So let's go back in here. And actually, let's go into the search. Sorry, let's go to admin search from here. And let's hit index equal to Linux. Was it Linux? No, it was main. And here we go. So now, if you see, I have created a field 1 of value 1, field 2 of the value 2, host, which is the indexer, with the port 8088, which is the HEC, which is listening on this port. I have the source overwrite, which I've just defined under the settings into the HEC configuration, and I have the source type -JSON, _JSON. So this is exactly what I've done. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the values, maybe value 2, or actually value 3, field 3, value 3, field 3. Let's hit enter. Let's search again. And here we go. Now we have field 3, value 3, field 2, you know. So pretty much this is what I've done. And of course, what we can do as well, let me change actually. So let me just put 4. Let me change that token and maybe make it like, instead of 4, I'm going to put a 5. Hit enter. Invalid token. Why? Because this token now does not match the token that I configured this HEC with. So there should be event collector. So if I'm going to search, I still don't have that. So this one is not going to accept this HTTP event payload. So let's go back again and change that to number 4. It was number 4. It was number 4, or let me see. Event. Actually here, number 4. Now it's a success again. So let's go back. Let's search it. And here we go. Now we have that entry here. So this is how we use the curl command to help developers kind of send those logs to the HTTP event collector. Now we have been using so far the authorization header. What we can do based on the Splunk documentation, which is here, it's a very good documentation. We can use actually basic authentication. So we can provide the -u, which is the username plus the token. So we don't need to provide the password. It's just that the admin user and the same HEC token. So let me show you that. So let's go back. This is the token. I'm gonna delete basically Splunk. Instead of authorization, I'm just gonna include Splunk as a user because I have the Splunk user. And instead of -h, I'm gonna use -u. It's a success. So let's go back and search. So it should have 4 entries now instead of 3. And here we go. This is the 4th entry.